When I was in high school back in the day, there was one teacher that kept asking the boys which soccer team they supported. Was it sexist? Maybe, but I never cared about soccer anyways. I just liked Steven Gerrard in the most casual and jazzed off ways. Well, anyways, after whichever boy he was speaking to answered, he would ask them if the team supported him back. I guess it could have been funny in a dad joke kind of way, but this teacher used this joke constantly. I guess he had reason to, though. There we were in South Africa, in Sleepy Hollow, Pietermaritzburg, a city that the players from Liverpool, Manchester United, and Chelsea probably never even heard of. And yet these soccer fanatics were such dedicated supporters. They'd follow their teams every match, wear their team's jerseys, and start arguments with supporters of other teams. Now, Steven Gerrard was cute and all, but you could never catch me watching even 5 minutes of any sport besides WWE wrestling, and emphasis on the World Wrestling Entertainment. Not even when my country hosted the World Cup back in 2010 did I watch soccer. So my version of this kind of devotion to a team that doesn't even know you exist would be TV series and movies. Since I was a fan of Twilight, for a long time I refused to support, aka watch, The Vampire Diaries, True Blood, and even Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I was Team Jasper Hale long before TikTok was invented, I'm just saying. So since I was a fan of Game of Thrones, I was determined not to like The Walking Dead, and I stopped watching it a few episodes into the first season when it came out. I don't even remember what year that must have been, but even though Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead were worlds apart and not comparable, that's exactly what the fandoms used to do when the shows were on air. But I really believe that not every show is for everyone, and sometimes a show can find you at the wrong time. So here I am, it's December 2025, and I'm ready to give The Walking Dead a second chance. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, the Nui channel. My name is Nish, and today I'm going to be reviewing Season 1 of The Walking Dead. This season has 6 episodes that are around 50 minutes, so if you are part of the 1% of the population that hasn't seen or heard of the show yet, I would recommend you go watch that first before checking out my video. So the opening scenes of episode 1 starts with this cop seeing a little girl, but when she turns around he realizes she's a zombie and he shoots her. And they do a really good job of setting the scene with the abandoned cars, decaying bodies, and all of that. Especially since this gory horror movie scene takes place in broad daylight on a beautiful sunny day, so you know this world is different from the one we know. After that we have the title screen, and then the most, you're probably wondering how I got here, scenes you could get without breaking the fourth wall. Deputy Sheriff Rick Grimes is shot on duty and he goes into a coma. When he wakes up, the hospital is empty and abandoned. The shots capturing all this is haunting. It's so good. So he meets Morgan and his son, and they serve us some exposition and explain how the zombies find you. Sound, light, movement, maybe even more things. And he also calls the zombies walkers. I truly don't mind that they're telling us all this. In fact, I welcome it. Rick Grimes is the main character in our introduction into this world, but the world is already overrun with zombies and our guy just woke up from a coma, so in order for him to survive, someone needs to catch him up. So he explains the humans are in Atlanta and that's where his family was going as well, before his wife got bitten. Rick gets them guns, but Morgan still can't kill his wife, so for now he's staying put. But at least now we have our goal. Rick wants to get to Atlanta to find his wife and son. He's sure that they're alive because they took all the photos from the house. Okay, but what if they took all the photos and died on the way to Atlanta like Morgan's wife? Spoiler alert, they didn't, but I'm just saying, why didn't the thought ever cross his mind? So he goes to Atlanta on a horse, and it's so damn creepy the way you can just hear the hooves echoing on these abandoned streets. It really hits you just the scope of all of this. At one point, he hears a helicopter and he speeds in that direction, but when he turns the corner, the street is chock full of walkers and they surround him. That moment gave me full body chills, genuinely more moving than any horror movie jump scare. WT and F. If I lived in a world like this, I would either go final solution on myself or surrender my fate to the vampires. To the zombies. But back to Rick, he gets knocked off his horse and he's able to get to a tank, but the poor horsey is not so lucky. Episode 2 starts with this human settlement out into the woods, and it further cements my thoughts on what I would do if I was living in the Walking Dead land. It looks like camping, but endlessly, and everyone is too up in each other's business if you ask me. So Laurie, who's Rick's wife, she's alive and she's at the settlement. She goes into the forest to meet up with Rick's cop buddy, Shane. And I don't like this plot line. I feel like we have enough to deal with trying to survive. Now we have to deal with the sleazy soap opera as well. I would rather go back to Rick, who's in the tank and gets a message from from my favorite character, Glenn. With his help, Rick is able to get out of the tank and meet up with Glenn, who takes him to this department store where the rest of his group are. So one of the members is a racist and he pulls out a gun on them, so Rick handcuffs him to the piping on the roof. Honestly, just kill him. There's an actual war going on between the human race and the walkers, and Dumbass is talking about black versus white. So Rick and Glenn cover themselves in the guts of dead walkers to disguise their scent and move amongst the walkers. They come up with a plan to make a loud noise with the car alarm and lure out the walkers so everyone can escape. Or I should say everyone important escapes, because Merle Dixon is still handcuffed on the roof. Episode 3 starts with Dixon losing his mind on the roof. Maybe it's heat stroke, maybe it's Maybelline. I'm so apathetic when it comes to this guy. But side note, is this the same actor that played Kreese's leader in the army from Cobra Kai? Because I think it might be. It looks like him. Rick's group meets up with Shane's group in the woods and his family reunites. Laurie wants to keep her relationship with Shane a secret from Rick, and she's also mad at him because he told her Rick died and that's the only reason she moved on. Shane looks so haunted when he watches the family interact. Poor guy. So anyways, everyone is on edge debating who's going to tell Merle's brother they left him there. And the next day we meet his brother Daryl. He's just as hot-headed and rednecked as you would expect from Merle's brother. So even though Shane, Laurie, and even his son Carl tell him not to, Rick forms a rescue party with Daryl, Glenn, and T-Dog to go back for Merle. When they get there, though, they find only his severed hand and a saw nearby. Episode 4 starts with our guys still on the roof. Daryl almost shoots T-Dog, but Rick intervenes and they go in search of Merle in the building. And I still don't get why he's so determined to live, but they find 2 dead walkers, which means Merle must have done it one-handed. They also find burnt skin, so Rick realizes he must have cauterized the wound. So after that, our bestie, Glenn, steals the show. He comes up with a brilliant plan to retrieve the bag with the guns, and even Daryl is impressed by him. Honestly, Daryl seems a bit more stable than his brother. He's also really good with his crossbow, and he defends Glenn when the gang starts to attack him. But unfortunately, he's not successful and Glenn gets kidnapped by them. I don't get it, the guns were right there, but they took Glenn instead. And at camp, one of the guys by the name of Jim starts digging holes because he had a dream, but he can't remember what it was about. And the whole community goes out to check on him and gets worried he's lost his mind. Maybe they are scared because he's going to kill all of them off and he's digging their graves. So Shane ties him to the tree and they all think it was heat stroke that caused it. Midway through the episode, I remembered who Glenn looks like. Doesn't he look like the big brother who dies in Big Hero 6? So anyways, Rick and his team go to save him and there's a confrontation with the gang that could have resulted in a shootout. They want the guns in exchange for Glenn, but then this Abuela shows up and she's so sweet but kind of out of it. She thinks Rick is there to arrest her grandson, and when he says he's looking for his friend, she takes his hand and guides him to Glenn. At first I found it strange the gang allowed this, but it turns out they're a bunch of softies taking care of old people. Let's all go aw in unison. Aw. So even though it's a lost cause, and obviously these people are not going to survive, not to mention there's only a finite amount of medication left and no new medicine incoming, even Rick's crew feels sorry for them and willingly gives them some of the guns. This is very similar to what actually happened in our world during the first round of COVID lockdowns when all the zoo animals were just abandoned. I'm only watching The Walking Dead now, but imagine if you watched this first and then the pandemic hits and you saw it play out, or at least a version of it playing out in real life. Now that they have Glenn and some of the guns, they're headed back to the camp, but they realize their vehicle is missing and Merle must have taken it. So he's pissed off and out for revenge, and the episode ends with a zombie attack at the camp. Ed, the wife beater, and Amy, the fishing sister, die in the attack, and Jim finally remembers why he dug those graves in the first place. So once Rick's crew get there, they're able to defeat the walkers, but then in episode 5, Shane is pissed because when Rick left for Merle, he took half the camp's manpower with him. Rick's argument is that he needed to get the guns, and without it, maybe the casualties would have been worse. So they both have a point, which is what Laurie thinks as well. Side note, that is one huge fringe that she has. But anyways, I won't say anything further. Andrea spends the episode beside her sister's dead body. All the other victims and walkers get a pickaxe to the head, but Andrea needs time to process things and say her final goodbyes, so she waits until her sister's eyes open as a walker to shoot her through the head. Totally normal behavior in this world, I guess. Also, Jim is the friend that hides the zombie bite. Did that whole meme start from this show? But anyways, he's not successful in hiding the bite. Rick's plan is to get the group to the CDC because the campsite is no longer safe and maybe they have a cure to help Jim. At one point when Rick and Shane are arguing about whether it's safer to stay there or go to the CDC, Rick makes an offhanded comment about how Shane would feel differently if it was his family, and Shane is rightfully upset because he did look after Rick's family like they were his own. And then while hunting, Shane contemplates shooting Rick, but ultimately he doesn't go through with it. But Dale sees this and his face says what we're all thinking. Anyways, they make the trip, but Jim is in too much pain and chooses to stay behind. By the way, was Jim having premonitions when he dug the graves? If so, he really will be missed. We need a psychic because I can't even see them having a future in this world. And this episode ends with the doors to the CDC headquarters opening. Then episode 6 actually begins with a flashback and we see that Shane really had reasons to believe Rick was dead. It also explains why, when Rick woke up from the coma in episode 1, there was a bed in front of his hospital room door. Then we cut to the present and the crew meets Dr. Edmund Jenner. He tests them to make sure they aren't infected, then he gives them food and wine, hot water, and their own rooms. So everyone is in a good mood except Shane, and Glenn points out he's a buzzkill when he interrupts the festive mood to ask what happened here. Why is Jenna the only person there? Dr. Jenna explains that some people left to be with their families when things went bad, and some people ended things when they realizes there's just no hope. And maybe before COVID, I wouldn't have understood. To me, back then, the CDC was a faceless, all-powerful organization like the FBI, CIA, or World Health Organization. But during and after COVID, I realized they are still just people, and it makes sense that they don't know how walkers started and have no idea whether it's aerial, bacterial, whatever, or how to stop it. There's no cure. And it all sounds very familiar, right? So Dr. Jenner is as nihilistic as me. He's ready to die, but he locks them in the building to let them die as well. He's certain humanity will end here. Rick is able to convince him to give them a chance at living, so he whispers something to Rick and then opens the door. Everyone decides to leave except Eve and Andrea, who decide it's pointless and want to die with the dog. So when T-Dog tries to persuade his wife to leave, everyone is like, hurry up, there's no time, come on, come on. But Dale stays to convince Andrea, and just when he decides to die with her, she changes her mind and they both manage to get out. If I was T-Dog, I would be so pissed off. And that's how season 1 ends, when the building explodes. And truly this show and Game of Thrones was part of the golden age of television. I understand the appeal now, and I wish I watched it as the show was released so I could be part of the hype, part of the crowd discussing, analyzing, speculating the show each week. When I heard the premise, which is humans trying to survive in a zombie apocalypse, I didn't see the vision. And I had the same experience when hearing about One Piece, because pirates at sea, doesn't sound like they can do much. It sounds boring, actually. But both shows really surprised me with their creativity and world building. I'm looking forward to watching season 2 of The Walking Dead next. If you enjoyed the show, if you enjoyed this review, please comment and let me know. Please subscribe to my channel, like this video. Thank you for watching, and bye.